Hello. I'm late, a little bit late. Not that late. Just a little bit late. There's a lot of Latin in one of these chapters, and like for the record, I googled some pronunciation guides, uh, and it's probably all gonna exit my brain as soon as I get back to the actual words mid-read. So, however many of you out there, a few who are watching the videos to begin with, who also know how to pronounce Latin, sorry, I guess. All right, I'll get started in a couple minutes. Okay, I think let's get started. Hang on. My mic is all of a sudden, of course, now choosing to be a little funky. Let's increase the volume. Gosh, so weird. Windows just decided to reduce it from 85 to 80 without me telling it to, but okay. Like, whatever. Go off, I guess. Okay, let's get down to business. All right, a Canticle for Leibowitz, Chapter 10. Actually, hang tight. Again, another false start. I'm really giving you guys a hard time today. Okay, there we go. Chapter 10. The trip to New Rome would require at least 3 months, perhaps longer, the time depending to some extent on the distance which Francis could cover before the inevitable band of robbers relieved him of his ass. He would be traveling alone and unarmed, carrying only his bindle stiff and begging bowl, in addition to the relic and its illuminated replica. He prayed that ignorant robbers would have no use for the latter, for indeed, among the bandits of the wayside were sometimes kindly thieves who took only what was of value to them and permitted their victim to retain his life, carcass, and personal effects. Others were less considerate. As a precaution, Brother Francis wore a black patch over his right eye. The peasants were a superstitious lot and could often be routed by even a hint of the evil eye. Thus armed and equipped, he set out to obey the summons of the Sacerdos Magnus, the most holy lord and ruler, Leo Pappus the 21st. Nearly 2 months after leaving the abbey, the monk met his robber on a heavily wooded mountain trail, far from any human settlement except the valley of the Misborn, which lay a few miles beyond a peak to the west, where, leper-like, a colony of the genetically monstrous lived in seclusion from the world. There were some such colonies which were supervised by hospitallers of the Holy Church, but the Valley of the Misborn was not among them. Sports who had escaped death at the hands of the forest tribes had congregated there several centuries ago. Their ranks were continually replenished by warped and crawling things that sought refuge from the world, but some among them were fertile and gave birth. Often, such children inherited the monstrosity of the parent stock. Often, they were born dead or never reached maturity, but occasionally the monstrous trait was recessive, and an apparently normal child resulted from the union of sports. Sometimes, however, the superficially normal offspring were blighted by some invisible deformity of heart or mind that bereft them, seemingly, of the essence of humanity, while leaving them its appearances. Even within the church, some had dared espouse the view that such creatures truly had been deprived of the Dei Imago from the conception, that their souls were but animal souls, that they might with impunity under the natural law be destroyed as animal and not man, that God had visited animal issue upon the species as a punishment for the sins that had nearly destroyed humankind. Few theologians whose belief in hell had never failed them would deprive their God of recourse to any form of temporal punishment, but for men to take it upon themselves to judge any creature born of woman to be lacking in the divine image was to usurp the privilege of heaven. Even the idiot which seemed less gifted than a dog or a pig or a goat shall, if born of woman, be called an immortal soul, thundered the magisterium, and thundered it again and again. After several such pronouncements, aimed at curbing infanticide, had issued from New Rome, the luckless misborn had come to be called the Pope's nephews, or the Pope's children by some. "Let that which is born alive to human parents be suffered to live," previous Leo had said, "in accordance with both the natural law and the divine law of love. Let it be cherished as a child and nurtured, whether its form and demeanor, for it is a fact whatever its form and demeanor, for it is a fact available to natural reason alone, unaided by divine revelation, that among the natural rights of man the right to parental assistance in an attempt to survive is precedent to all other rights, and may not be modified legitimately by society or state, except in so far as princes are empowered to implement that right. Not even the beasts of the earth act otherwise." The robber that accosted Brother Francis was not in any obvious way one of the malformed, but that he came from the valley of the misborn was made evident when two hooded figures arose from behind a tangle of brush on the slope that overlooked the trail and hooted mockingly at the monk from ambush, while aiming at him with drawn bows. From such a distance, Francis was not certain of his first impression that one hand grasped a bow with 6 fingers or an extra thumb, but there was no doubt at all that one of the robed figures was wearing a robe with 2 hoods, although he could make out no faces, nor could he determine whether the extra hood contained an extra head or not. The robber himself stood in the trail directly ahead. He was a short man, but heavy as a bull, with a glazed knob of a pate and a jaw like a block of granite. He stood in the trail with his legs spread wide and his massive arms folded across his chest while he watched the approach of the small figure astride the ass. The robber, as best Francis could see, was armed only with his own brawn and a knife which he did not bother to remove from his belt thong. He beckoned Francis forward. When the monk stopped 50 yards away, one of the Pope's children unleashed an arrow. The missile whipped into the trail just behind the donkey, causing the animal to spurt ahead. "Get off!" the robber ordered. The ass stopped in the path. Brother Francis tossed back his hood to reveal the eye patch and raised a trembling finger to touch it. He began lifting the patch slowly from his eye. The robber tossed back his head and laughed a laugh that might have sprung, Francis thought, from the throat of Satan. The monk muttered an exorcism, but the robber appeared untouched. "You black-sacked jeebers wore that one out years ago," he said. "Now get off." Brother Francis smiled, shrugged, and dismounted without further protest. The robber inspected the donkey, patting its flanks, examining teeth and hooves. "Eat! Eat!" cried one of the robed creatures on the hillside. "Not this time," barked the robber. "Too scrawny." Brother Francis was not entirely convinced that they were talking about the donkey. "Good day to you, sir," the monk said pleasantly. "You may take the ass. Walking will improve my health, I think." He smiled again and started away. An arrow slashed into the trail at his feet. "Stop that!" howled the robber. Then, to Francis, "Now strip, and let's see what's in that roll and in the package." Brother Francis touched his begging bowl and made a gesture of helplessness, which brought only another scornful laugh from the robber. "I've seen that alms pot trick before, too," he said. "The last man with the bowl had half a hecklo of gold hidden in his boot. Now strip!" Brother Francis, who was not wearing boots, hopefully displayed his sandals, but the robber gestured impatiently. The monk untied his bindlestiff, spread its contents for display, and began to undress. The robber searched his clothing, found nothing, and tossed the clothing back to its owner, who breathed his gratitude. He had been expecting to be left naked on the trail. "Now, let's see inside that other package." "It contains only documents, sir," the monk protested. "Of value to no one except the owner." "Open it!" Silently, Brother Francis untied the package and unwrapped the original blueprint and the illuminated commemoration thereof. The gold leaf inlay and the colorful design flashed brilliantly in the sunlight that filtered through the foliage. The robber's craggy jaw dropped an inch. He whistled softly. "What a pretty! Now, wouldn't the woman like that to hang on the cabin wall?" Francis went sick inside. "Gold!" the robber shouted to his robed accomplices on the hill. "Eat! Eat!" came the gurgling and chortling reply. "We'll eat, never fear," called the robber, then explained conversationally to Francis. "They get hungry after a couple of days just sitting there. The business is bad. Traffic's light these days." Francis nodded. The robber resumed his admiration of the illuminated replica. "Lord, if thou hast sent him to test me, then help me to die like a man, that he may take it only over the dead body of thy servant. Holy Leibowitz, see this deed, and pray for me." "What is it?" the robber asked. "A charm?" He studied the two documents together for a time. "Oh, one is a ghost of the other. What magic is this?" He stared at Brother Francis with suspicious gray eyes. "What is it called?" Transistorized control system for Unit 6B, the monk stammered. The robber, who had been looking at the documents upside down, could nevertheless see that one diagram involved a figure background reversal of the other, an effect which seemed to intrigue him as much as the gold leaf. He traced out the similarities in design with a short and dirty finger, leaving a faint smudge on the illuminated lambskin. Francis held back tears. "Please," the monk gasped. "The gold is so thin, it's worth nothing to speak of. Weigh it in your hand. The whole thing weighs no more than the paper itself. It's of no use to you. Please, sir, take my clothing instead. Take the donkey. Take my bindlestiff. Take whatever you will, but leave me these. They mean nothing to you." The robber's gray gaze, meditative. He watched the monk's agitation, rubbed his jaw. "I'll let you keep your clothes and your donkey and everything, except this," he offered. "I'll just take the charms, then." "For the love of God, sir, then kill me too," Brother Francis wailed. The robber snickered. "We'll see. And tell me what they're for." "Nothing. One is a memento of a man long dead, an ancient. The other is only a copy." "What good are they to you?" Francis closed his eyes for a moment, tried to think of a way to explain. You know the forest tribes, how they venerate their ancestors?" The gray eyes of the robber flashed angrily for a moment. "We despise our ancestors," he barked. "Cursed be they who gave us birth." "Cursed! Cursed!" echoed one of the shrouded archers on the hillside. "You know who we are, where we are from?" Francis nodded. "I meant no offense. The ancient whose relic this is, he's not our ancestor. He was our teacher of old. We venerate his memory. This is only like a keepsake. No more. What about the copy? I made it myself. Please, sir, it took me 15 years. It's nothing to you. Please, you wouldn't take 15 years of a man's life for no reason. 15 years? The robber threw back his head and howled with laughter. You spent 15 years making that? Oh, but... Francis was suddenly silent. His eyes swung toward the robber's stubby forefinger. The finger was tapping the original blueprint. That took you 15 years, and it's almost ugly beside the other. He slapped his paunch in between guffaws, kept pointing at the relic. 15 years! So that's what you do out there. Why? What is the dark ghost image good for? 15 years to make that. What a woman's work! Brother Francis watched him in stunned silence. That the robber should mistake the sacred relic itself for the copy of the relic left him too shocked to reply. Still laughing, the robber took both documents in his hands and prepared to rip them both in half. Jesus, Mary, Joseph! The monk screamed and went to his knees in the trail. For the love of God, sir! The robber tossed the papers on the ground. I'll wrestle you for them, he offered sportingly. Those against, my blade. Done, said Francis impulsively, thinking that a contest would at least afford heaven a chance to intervene in an unobtrusive way. O God, thou who strengthened Jacob so that he overcame the angel on the rock. They squared off. Brother Francis crossed himself. The robber took his knife from his belt thong and tossed it after the papers. They circled. 3 seconds later, the monk lay groaning on the flat of his back under a short mountain of muscle. A sharp rock seemed to be severing his spine. Said the robber, and arose to reclaim his knife and roll up the documents. Hands folded as if in prayer, Brother Francis crept after him on his knees, begging at the top of his lungs, Please, then, take only one, not both. Please. You've got to buy it back now, the robber chortled. I won them fair enough. I have nothing. I'm poor. That's all right. If you want them that bad, you'll get gold. 2 heklos of gold. That's the ransom. Bring it here any time. I'll tuck your things in my shanty. You want them back? Just bring the gold. Listen, they're important to other people, not to me. I was taking them to the Pope. Maybe they'll pay you for the important one, but let me have the other one, just to show them. It's of no importance at all. The robber laughed over his shoulder. I believe you'd kiss a boot to get it back. Brother Francis caught up with him and fervently kissed his boot. This proved too much for even such a fellow as the robber. He shoved the monk away with his foot, separated the 2 papers, and flung one of them in Francis's face with a curse. He climbed aboard the monk's donkey and started riding it up the slope toward the ambush. Brother Francis snatched up the precious document and hiked along beside the robber, thanking him profusely and blessing him repeatedly while the robber guided the ass toward the shrouded archers. 15 years, the robber snorted, and again shoved Francis away with his foot. Begone! He waved the illuminated splendor aloft in the sunlight. Remember, 2 heklos of gold will ransom your keepsake, and tell your Pope I won it fair. Francis stopped climbing. He sent a glowing cross of benediction after the departing bandit, and quietly praised God for the existence of such selfless robbers who could make such an ignorant mistake. He fondled the original blueprint lovingly as he hiked away down the trail. The robber was proudly displaying the beautiful commemoration to his mutant companions on the hill. Eat! Eat! Said one of them, petting the donkey. Ride! Ride! Corrected the robber. Eat later. But when Brother Francis had left them far behind, a great sadness gradually engulfed him. The taunting voice still rang in his ears. 15 years! So that's what you do over there! 15 years! What a woman's work! The The robber had made a mistake, but the 15 years were gone anyhow, and with it all the love and torment that had gone into the commemoration. Cloistered as he had been, Francis had become unaccustomed to the ways of the outside world, to its harsh habits and curt attitudes. He found his heart deeply troubled by the robber's mockery. He thought of Brother Jairus' gentler mockery of earlier years. Maybe Brother Jairus had been right. His head hung low in his hood as he traveled slowly on. At least there was the original relic. At least. Take a brief pause, and then do chapter 11. Okay, chapter 11. The hour had come. Brother Francis, in his simple monk's habit, had never felt less important than at that moment as he knelt in the majestic basilica before the beginning of the ceremony. The stately movements, the vivid swirls of color, the sounds which accompanied the ceremonious preparations for ceremony already seemed liturgical in spirit, making it difficult to bear in mind that nothing of importance was happening yet. Bishops, monsignori, cardinals, priests, and various lay functionaries in elegant, antiquated dress moved to and fro in the great church, but their comings and goings were graceful clockwork which never paused, stumbled, or changed its mind to rush in the other direction. As Sempetrius entered the basilica, so grandly was he attired that Francis at first mistook the cathedral workman for a prelate. The Sempetrius carried a footstool. He carried it with such casual pomp that the monk, if he had not been kneeling, might have genuflected as the object drifted by. The Sempetrius dropped to one knee before the high altar, then crossed to the papal throne, where he substituted the new footstool for one which seemed to have a loose leg. Thereupon he departed by the same route as he had come. Brother Francis marveled at the studied elegance of movement that accompanied even the trivial. No one hurried. No one minced or fumbled. No motion occurred which did not quietly contribute to the dignity and overpowering beauty of this ancient place, even as the motionless statues and paintings contributed to it. Even the whisper of one's breathing seemed to echo faintly from distant apses. Terribilis est locus iste, hic domus Dei est et porta caeli. Terrible indeed, house of God, gate of heaven. Some of the statues were alive, he observed, after a time. A suit of armor stood against the wall, a few yards to his left. Its mailed fist held the staff of a gleaming battle-axe. Not even the plume of its helmet had stirred during the time Brother Francis had been kneeling there. A dozen identical suits of armor stood at intervals along the walls. Only after seeing a horsefly crawl through the visor of the statue on his left did he suspect that the warlike husk contained an occupant. His eye could detect no motion, but the armor emitted a few metallic creaks while it harbored the horsefly. These, then, must be the Papal Guard, so renowned in knightly battle, the small private army of God's first vicar. A captain of the guard was making a stately tour of his men. For the first time, the statue moved. It lifted its visor in salute. The captain thoughtfully paused and used his kerchief to brush the horsefly from the forehead of the expressionless face inside the helmet before passing on. The statue lowered its visor and resumed its immobility. The stately decor of the basilica was briefly marred by the entrance of pilgrim throngs. The throngs were well organized and efficiently ushered, but they were patently strangers to this place. Most of them seemed to tread on tiptoe to their stations, cautious to create no sound and as little movement as possible, unlike the Sempetri and the new Roman clergy, who made sound and motion eloquent. Here and there among the pilgrims, someone stifled a cough or stumbled. Suddenly, the basilica became warlike as the guard was strengthened. A new troop of mailed statues tramped into the sanctuary itself, dropped to one knee and tilted their pike staffs, saluting the altar before taking their posts. 2 of them stood flanking the papal throne. A third fell to his knees at the throne's right hand, remained kneeling there with the sword of Peter lying across his upraised palms. The tableau became motionless again, except for occasional dancing of flame among the altar candles. Upon the hallowed silence burst a sudden peal of trumpets. The sound's intensity mounted until the throbbing ta-ra-ra, ta-ra-ra could be felt upon one's face and grew painful to the ears. The voice of the trumpets was not musical but enunciatory. The first notes began in mid-scale, then climbed slowly in pitch, intensity, and urgency until the monk's scalp crawled and there seemed to be nothing at all in the basilica but the explosion of the tubas. Then dead silence, followed by the cry of a tenor. First cantor, Appropinquat agnis pastor et ovibus passendis. Second cantor, Genua nunc flectantur omnia. Jusit olim Jesus Petrum pascere gregem Domini. Ecce Petris Pontifex Maximus. Gaudiet igitur populus Christi et gratias aget Domino. Nom decibimur Spiritus Sancto. Alleluia, Alleluia. The crowd arose and then knelt in a slow wave that followed the movement of the chair containing the frail old man in white who gestured his blessings to the people as the gold, black, purple, and red procession moved him slowly toward the throne. Breath kept choking up in the throat of the small monk from a distant abbey in a distant desert. It was impossible to see everything that was happening. So overwhelming was the tide of music in motion, drowning one's senses and sweeping the mind along willy-nilly toward that which was soon to come. The ceremony was brief. Its intensity would have become unendurable had it been longer. And Monsignor Malfredo Aguera, the saint's advocate himself, Brother Francis observed, approached the throne and knelt. After a brief silence, he voiced his plea in plain chant. Sancte Peder, ab sapientia summa petimis utile beatus Leibowitz cujus miracula mirati sunt multi. The request called upon Leo to enlighten his people by solemn definition concerning the pious belief that the Beatus Leibowitz was indeed a saint, worthy of the dulia of the Church as well as the veneration of the faithful. Gratissima nobis casa fili, the voice of the old man in white sang in response, explaining that his own heart's desire was to announce by solemn proclamation that the blessed martyr was among the saints, but also that it was by divine guidance alone, subducato sancti spiritus, that he might comply with Aguera's request. He asked all to pray for that guidance. Again, the thunder of the choir filled the basilica with the litany of the saints. Father of heaven, God have mercy on us. Son, repurchaser of the world, God have mercy on us. Ghost most holy, God have mercy on us. O sacred threefoldhood, God one and only, miserere nobis. Holy Mary, pray for us. Sancta Dei Genitrix, ora pro nobis. Sancta Virgo Virginum, ora pro nobis. The thunder of the litany continued. Francis looked up at a painting of the Blessed Leibowitz, newly unveiled. The fresco was of heroic proportions. It portrayed the trial of the Beatus before the mob, but the face was not wryly smiling as it smiled in Fingo's work. It was, however, majestic, Francis thought, and in keeping with the rest of the basilica. Omnis sancti martyrs, orate pro nobis. When the litany was finished, again, Monsignor Malfredo Aguera made his plea to the Pope, asking that the name of Isaac Edward Leibowitz be formally enrolled in the calendar of saints. Again, the guiding spirit was invoked as the Pope chanted the Veni, Creator Spiritus. And yet a third time Malfredo Aguera pleaded for the proclamation, Surgat ergo Petris ipsi. At last it came. The 21st Leo intoned the decision of the Church, rendered under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, proclaiming the existing fact that an ancient and rather obscure technician named Leibowitz was truly a saint in heaven, whose powerful intercession might, and of right ought to be, reverently implored. A feast day was named for a Mass in his honor. Holy Leibowitz, intercede for us, Brother Francis breathed with the others. After a brief prayer, the choir burst into the Te Deum. After a mass honoring the new saint, it was finished. Escorted by two scarlet-liveried Sidarii of the outer palace, the small party of pilgrims passed through a seemingly endless sequence of corridors and antechambers, halting occasionally before the ornate table of some new official who examined the credentials and goose-quilled his signature on a licetadiri, for a Sidarius to hand to the next official, whose title grew progressively longer and less pronounceable as the party proceeded. Brother Francis was shivering. Among his fellow pilgrims were two bishops, a man wearing ermine and gold, a clan chief of the forest people, converted but still wearing the panther-skin tunic and panther headgear of his tribal totem, a leather-clad simpleton carrying a hooded peregrine falcon on one wrist, evidently as a gift to the Holy Father, and several women, all of whom seemed to be wives or concubines, as best Francis could judge by their actions, of the, quote, converted clan chief of the panther people. Or perhaps they were ex-concubines put away by canon, but not by tribal custom. After climbing the Scala Calestis, the pilgrims were welcomed by the sombrely clad Cameralis Gestor and ushered into the small anteroom of the vast consistorial hall. "The Holy Father will receive them here," the high-ranking lackey softly informed the Sidarius who carried the credentials. He glanced over the pilgrims, rather disapprovingly, Francis thought. He whispered briefly to the Sidarius. Sidarius reddened and whispered to the clan chief. The clan chief glowered and removed his fanged and snarling headdress, letting the panther head dangle over his shoulder. There was a brief conference about positions, while his supreme unctuousness, the leading lackey, in tones so soft as to seem reproving, stationed his visiting chess pieces about the room in accordance with some arcane protocol, which only the Sidarii seemed to understand. The Pope was not long in arriving. The little man in the white cassock, surrounded by his retinue, strode briskly into the audience room. Brother Francis experienced a sudden dizzy spell. He remembered that Dom Arcos had threatened to flay him alive if he fainted during the audience, and he steeled himself against it. The line of pilgrims knelt. The old man in white gently bade them arise. Brother Francis finally found the courage to focus his eyes. In the basilica, the Pope had been only a radiant spot of white in a sea of color. Gradually, here in the audience room, Brother Francis perceived at closer range that the Pope was not like the fabled nomads, 9 feet tall. To the monk's surprise, the frail old man, father of princes and kings, bridge builder of the world and vicar on earth of Christ, appeared much less ferocious than Dom Arcos, Abbas. The Pope moved slowly along the line of pilgrims, greeting each, embracing one of the bishops, conversing with each in his own dialect or through an interpreter, laughing at the expression of the Monsignor to whom he transferred the task of carrying the falconer's bird, and addressing the clan leader of the forest people with a peculiar hand gesture and a grunted word of forest dialect, which caused that panther-clad chieftain to glow with a sudden grin of delight. The Pope noticed the dangling panther headgear and paused to replace it on the tribesman's head. The latter's chest bulged with pride. He glared about the room, apparently to catch the eye of his supreme unctuousness, the leading lackey, but that official seemed to have vanished into the woodwork. The Pope drew nearer to Brother Francis. "Ecce Patris Pontifex! Behold, Peter, the high priest, Leo the 21st, himself, whom alone God did appoint prince over all countries and kingdoms, to root up, pull down, waste, destroy, plant, and build, that he might preserve a faithful people." And yet, in the face of Leo, the monk saw a kindly meekness which hinted that he was worthy of that title, loftier than any bestowed upon princes and kings, whereby he was called the slave of the slaves of God. Francis knelt quickly to kiss the fisherman's ring. As he arose, he found himself clutching the relic of the saint behind him, as if ashamed to display it. The pontiff's amber eyes compelled him gently. Leo spoke softly in the curial manner, an affectation which he seemed to dislike as burdensome, but which he practiced for custom's sake in speaking to visitors less savage than the Panther Chief.
Our heart was deeply grieved when we heard of your misfortune, dear son. An account of your journey reached our ears. At our own request you traveled here, but while on your way you were set upon by robbers. Is that not true?
Yes, Holy Father, but it really is of no importance. I mean, it was important, except... Francis stammered. The white old man smiled gently.
We know that you brought us a gift, and that it was stolen from you along the way. Be not troubled of that. Your presence is gift enough to us. Long have we cherished the hope of greeting in person the discoverer of Emily Leibowitz's remains. We know, too, of your labors at the Abbey. For the brothers of St. Leibowitz we have always felt a most fervent affection. Without your work, the world's amnesia might well be total. As the Church, Mysticum Christi Corpus, is a body, so has your order served as an organ of memory in that body. We owe much to your holy patron and founder. Future ages may owe him even more. May we hear more of your journey, dear son?
Brother Francis produced the blueprint.
The highwayman was kind enough to leave this in my keeping, Holy Father. He mistook it for a copy of the illumination, which I was bringing as a gift.
You did not, correct his mistake? Brother Francis blushed.
I'm ashamed to admit, Holy Father. This, then, is the original relic you found in the crypt?
Yes. The Pope's smile became wry.
So, then, the bandit thought your work was the treasure itself? Even a robber can have a keen eye for art, yes? Monsignor Aguera told us of the beauty of your commemoration. What a pity that it was stolen.
It was nothing, Holy Father. I only regret that I wasted 15 years.
Wasted? How wasted? If the robber had not been misled by the beauty of your commemoration, he might have taken this, might he not?
Brother Francis admitted the possibility. The 21st Leo took the ancient blueprint in his withered hands and carefully unrolled it. He studied its design for a time in silence. Then,
tell us, do you understand the symbols used by Leibowitz? The meaning of the, thing represented?
No, Holy Father, my ignorance is complete. The Pope leaned toward him to whisper,
So is ours.
He chuckled, pressed his lips to the relic as if kissing an altar stone, then re-rolled it and handed it to an attendant.
We thank you from the bottom of our heart for those 15 years, beloved son, he added to Brother Francis. Those years were spent to preserve this original. Never think of them as wasted. Offer them to God. Someday the meaning of the original may be discovered and may prove important.
The old man blinked. Or was it a wink? Francis was almost convinced that the Pope had winked at him.
We'll have you to thank for that.
The wink, or the blink, seemed to bring the room into clearer focus for the monk. For the first time, he noticed a moth hole in the Pope's cassock. The cassock itself was almost threadbare. The carpet in the audience room was worn through in spots. Plaster had fallen from the ceiling in several places, but dignity had overshadowed poverty. Only for a moment after the wink did Brother Francis notice hints of poverty at all. The distraction was transient.
By you, we wish to send our warmest regards to all members of your community, and to your abbot, Leo was saying. To them, as to you, we wish to extend our apostolic benediction. We shall give you a letter to them, announcing the benediction.
He paused, then blinked, or winked, again.
Quite incidentally, the letter will be safeguarded. We shall affix to it the nole molestare, excommunicating anyone who waylays the bearer.
Brother Francis murmured his thanks for such insurance against highwaymanship. He did not deem it fitting to add that the robber would be unable to read the warning, or even understand the penalty.
I shall do my best to deliver it, Holy Father.
Again, Leo leaned close to whisper,
And to you we shall give a special token of our affection. Before you leave, see Monsignor Aguera. We would prefer to give it to you by our own hands, but this is not the proper moment. The Monsignor will present it for us. Do with it what you will. Thank you very much indeed, Holy Father. And now, goodbye, beloved son.
The pontiff moved on, speaking to each pilgrim in time, and when it was over, the solemn benediction, the audience had ended. Monsignor Aguera touched Brother Francis's arm as the pilgrim group passed out the portals. He embraced the monk warmly. The postulator of the saint's cause had aged so greatly that Francis recognized him only with difficulty at close range, but Francis, too, was gray at the temples, and had grown wrinkled about the eyes from squinting over the copy table. The Monsignor handed him a package and a letter as they descended the Scala Caelestis. Francis glanced at the letter's address and nodded. His own name was written on the package, which bore a diplomatic seal.
For me, Messer. Yes, a personal token from the Holy Father. Better not open it here. Now, can I do anything for you before you leave New Rome? I'd be glad to show you anything you've missed.
Brother Francis thought briefly. There had already been an exhaustive tour. I would like to see the Basilica just once again, Messer, he said at last.
Why, of course, but is that all?
Brother Francis paused again. They had fallen behind the other departing pilgrims. I would like to confess, he added softly.
Nothing easier than that, said Aguera, adding with a chuckle, You're in the right town, you know. Here you can get anything absolved that you're worried about. Is it something deadly enough to require the attention of the Pope?
Francis reddened and shook his head.
Oh, how about the Grand Penitentiary, then? He'll not only absolve you if you're repentant, he'll even hit you over the head with a rod in the bargain.
I meant... Well, I was asking you, Messer, the monk stammered.
Me? Why me? I'm nobody fancy. Here you are in a whole town full of red hats, and you want to confess to Malfredo Aguera.
Because you were our patron's advocate, the monk explained.
Oh, I see. Why, of course I'll hear your confession, but I can't absolve you in the name of your patron, you know. It'll have to be the Holy Trinity, as usual. Will that do?
Francis had little to confess, but his heart had long been troubled, at the prompting of Dom Arcos, by the fear that his discovery of the shelter might have hindered the case for the saint. Leibowitz's postulator heard him, counseled him, and absolved him in the basilica, then led him around that ancient church. During the ceremony of canonization and the mass that followed, Brother Francis had noticed only the majestic splendor of the building. Now the aged Monsignor pointed to crumbling masonry, places in need of repair, and the shameful condition of some of the older frescoes. Again, he caught a glimpse of poverty which dignity veiled. The church was not wealthy in this age. At last, Francis was free to open the package. The package contained a purse. In the purse were 2 heklos of gold. He glanced at Malfredo Aguera. The Monsignor smiled.
You did say that the robber won the commemoration from you in a wrestling match, didn't you? Aguera asked. Yes, Messer. Well, then, even if you were forced into it, you made the choice to wrestle him for it yourself, didn't you? You accepted his challenge?
The monk nodded.
Then I don't think you'd be condoning the wrong if you brought it back.
He clapped the monk's shoulder and blessed him. Then it was time to go. The small keeper of the Flame of Knowledge trudged back toward his abbey on foot. There were days and weeks on the trail, but his heart was singing as he approached the robbers' outpost. "Do with it what you will," Pope Leo had said of the gold. Not only that, the monk had now, in addition to the purse, an answer to the robbers' scornful question. He thought of the books in the audience room, waiting there for a reawakening. The robber, however, was not waiting at his outpost, as Francis had hoped. There were recent footprints in the trail at that place, but the prints led cross-trail, and there was no sign of the robber. The sun filtered through the trees to cover the ground with leafy shadows. The forest was not dense, but it offered shade. He sat down beside the trail to wait. An owl hooted at midday from the relative darkness in the depths of some distant arroyo. Buzzards circled in a patch of blue beyond the treetops. It seemed peaceful in the forest that day. As he listened sleepily to the sparrows fluttering in the nearby brush, he found himself not greatly concerned about whether the robber came today or tomorrow. So long was his journey that he would not be unhappy to enjoy a day of rest while waiting. He sat watching the buzzards. Occasionally, he glanced down the trail that led toward his distant home in the desert. The robber had chosen an excellent location for his lair. From this place, one could observe more than a mile of trail in either direction, while remaining unobserved in the thatch of forest. Something moved on the trail in the distance. Brother Francis shielded his eyes and studied the distant movement. There was a sunny area down the road where a brush fire had cleared several acres of land around the trail that led southwest. The trail shimmered under a mirror of heat in the sun-swept region. You could not see clearly because of the shiny reflections, but there was motion in the midst of the heat. There was a wriggling black iota. At times, it seemed to wear ahead. At times, it was completely obscured in the heat glaze, but nevertheless he could determine that it was gradually approaching. Once, when the edge of a cloud brushed at the sun, the heat shimmer subsided for a few seconds. His tired, myopic eyes determined then that the wriggling iota was really a man, but at too great a distance for recognition. He shivered. Something about the iota was too familiar. But no, it couldn't possibly be the same. The monk crossed himself and began telling his rosary beads while his eyes remained intent on the distant thing in the heat shimmer. While he had been waiting there for the robber, a debate had been in progress higher on the side of the hill. The debate had been conducted in whispered monosyllables and had lasted for nearly an hour. Now the debate was ended. Two hoods had conceded to one hood. Together, the Pope's children stole quietly from behind their brush table and crept down the side of the hill. They advanced to within 10 yards of Francis before a pebble rattled. The monk was murmuring the third Ave of the fourth glorious mystery of the Rosary when he happened to look around. The arrow hit him squarely between the eyes. "Eat! Eat! Eat!" the Pope's child cried. On the trail to the southwest, the old wanderer sat down on a log and closed his eyes to rest them against the sun. He fanned himself with a tattered basket hat and munched his spice leaf quid. He had been wandering for a long time. The search seemed endless, but there was always the promise of finding what he sought across the next rise or beyond the bend in the trail. When he had finished fanning himself, he clapped the hat back on his head and scratched at his brushy beard while blinking around at the landscape. There was a patch of unburned forest on the hillside just ahead. It offered welcome shade, but still the wanderer sat there in the sunlight and watched the curious buzzards. They had congregated, and they were swooping rather low over the wooded patch. One bird made bold to descend among the trees, but it quickly flapped into view again, flew under power until it found a rising column of air, then went into gliding ascent. The dark host of scavengers seemed to be expending more than a usual amount of energy at flapping their wings. Usually they soared, conserving strength. Now they thrashed the air above the hillside, as if impatient to land. As long as the buzzards remained interested but reluctant, the wanderer remained the same. There were cougars in these hills. Beyond the peak were things even worse than cougars, and sometimes they prowled afar. The wanderer waited. Finally, the buzzards descended among the trees. The wanderer waited 5 minutes more. At last he arose and limped ahead toward the forested patch, dividing his weight between his game leg and his staff. After a while, he entered the forested area. The buzzards were busy at the remains of a man. The wanderer chased the birds away with his cudgel and inspected the human remnants. Significant portions were missing. There was an arrow through the skull, protruding at the back of the neck. The old man looked nervously around at the brush. There was no one in sight, but there were plenty of footprints in the vicinity of the trail. It was not safe to stay. Safe or not, the job had to be done. The old wanderer found a place where the earth was soft enough for digging with hands and stick. While he dug, the angry buzzards circled low over the treetops, sometimes darting earthward, but then flapping their way skyward again. For an hour, then two, they fluttered anxiously over the wooded hillside. One bird finally landed. It strutted indignantly about a mound of fresh earth with a rock marker at one end. Disappointed, it took wing again. The flock of dark scavengers abandoned the site and soared high on the rising currents of air while they hungrily watched the land. There was a dead hog beyond the valley of the Mistborn. The buzzards observed it gaily and glided down for a feast. Later, in a far mountain pass, a cougar licked her chops and left her kill. The buzzards seemed thankful for the chance to finish her meal. The buzzards laid their eggs in season and lovingly fed their young, a dead snake and bits of a feral dog. The younger generation waxed strong, soared high and far on black wings, waiting for the fruitful earth to yield up her bountiful carrion. Sometimes dinner was only a toad. Once it was a messenger from New Rome. Their flight carried them over the Midwestern plains. They were delighted with the bounty of good things which the nomads left lying on the land during their ride over toward the south. The buzzards laid their eggs in season and lovingly fed their young. Earth had nourished them bountifully for centuries. She would nourish them for centuries more. Pickings were good for a while in the region of the Red River, but then, out of the carnage, a city-state arose. For rising city-states, the buzzards had no fondness, although they approved of their eventual fall. They shied away from Texarkana and ranged far over the plain to the west. After the manner of all living things, they replenished the earth many times with their kind. Eventually, it was the year of our Lord, 3174. There were rumors of war. Hey, that is the end of part 1 of A Canticle for Leibowitz, Fiat Homo. Just to give some more time perspective, Fiat Homo, I think, occurs in the 26th century. Or we might have that wrong, though. No, I'm sorry. It occurs in, yeah, I believe the 26th century. Hang on, I'm double checking now because I don't want to be wrong. Yes, 26th century, yes. So the next section will take place about 600 years later. And this is entitled Fiat Lux. Boy, Latin is tough, and I know I butchered it, so, whoever was listening and grimaced and gritted their teeth throughout that, thanks for your forbearance. What else? Jeez. It's holiday season. I'm probably not going to read again until... Well, my schedule is next Monday. And actually, that works out. So I'll probably just read next Monday. So never mind. It's all good. I'll see you on the 29th. I don't know. Sometime between 5:15 and 5:30. If you feel like listening live, I'll be online on Twitch. If you got feedback, questions, comments, send them my way. Yeah, I don't know. This was I like this book a lot. There are times when Walter Miller is a little hard to read out loud. He really likes long sentences, like long sentences with semicolons, with em dashes, and, you know, there are times when that's fine, and there are other times when you're like, good lord, I'm only halfway through this sentence, and there's like 3 different independent clauses here, and god, how does this sound right now mid-read? Yeah, it's always different when you read it in your head or practice it out loud. But I like him. I like that it's sort of a... I don't know. I usually like kind of more poetic prose like Jack Vance, but this is nice too sometimes. It's almost like a journal or a report. I don't know. Anyway, I'm a fan. All right, folks, I'll see you next Monday. In the meantime, for those of you who celebrate Christmas, have a good holiday. And for those of you who don't, enjoy what I hope is some time off from work. Fuck work, right? So relax, kick back. I don't know, do whatever you want to do. And I will see you folks on Monday. Take it easy.